Day. Campaigns across the state are now in full swing, and we are doing our very best to keep up with it all. It is difficult, but so are my next guests, and they are the insiders, veterans of the state political scene who bring their collective decades of experience, decades, mind you, to our show each week. Joining us tonight is Steve Greenberg. He is a former communications director to 2 Assembly Speakers and current pollster for Siena College. And across the table from him is Dave Catalfamo, former communications director to Governor Pataki, former Governor Pataki, and now a partner at Capital Public Strategies. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Collective decades. I mean, the two of you got, what, like 80 years?
Pretty much centuries at this point.
Yeah.
He goes back to Franklin.
Millard Fillmore. Yeah.
Well, we will start with you. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
Because the action's all on your side, really. Well,
yeah.
sort of. But anyway, Carl Palladino. Rick Lazio is gone. You actually said right here on this very show that you thought that he should go, and apparently he heeded your call.
Oh, I don't know. Rick, as I said at the time, is an honorable, decent guy who's always done the best thing for the party, and he did it again. You know, I applaud him for doing it. It was a difficult thing for him to do, but he stepped up and did the right thing so that we have a chance to have a real contest in November.
And you feel comfortable with Carl Palladino?
I think that Carl Palladino represents the best chance that Republicans have to win the State House. And the question is really going to be, you know, can Carl Palladino translate the anger that he's tapped into a positive message of change? I think
note that you are not answering the question. The question was if you felt comfortable with him.
It's yet to be seen. I mean, you know, he's made me more comfortable, for sure. You know, I mean, since he's won the nomination, he clearly has modulated his campaign in a way that tells me that they are working to be a very serious and very forceful opponent to Andrew Cuomo.
Steve?
Yes, Liz?
Do you think that Carl Palladino can beat Andrew Cuomo?
I think it's possible. I think he's got a very uphill road to climb. Look, this is a different kind of race because of the electorate this year being as angry as they are. You alluded to that, Dave. But the real question is, can Carl Palladino have the resources to get out there and mount a campaign that has to do 2 things? 1, introduce him to voters and make voters comfortable with him, and 2, knock Andrew Cuomo down, because right now Andrew Cuomo is very popular with voters. They do not see him as part of the Albany problem. As much as they hate Albany, they don't blame him for it. He has a 2-to-1 favorability rating. So in order for Palladino to win in a state that is 2-to-1 Democratic, what he's got to do is bring himself up, give voters a reason to vote for him, but also give voters, particularly independents and more moderate Democrats, a reason to vote against Andrew Cuomo, which is what they're inclined to do right now.
But Carl Palladino does 2 things to this race that didn't exist with Rick Lazio. One is he moves Cuomo to the left. Because where Rick couldn't. He also does the other thing that Rick couldn't do, which is he's bringing energy and excitement to the race. And the third thing that he's going to do is he's the anti-establishment guy, whereas Rick was very much an establishment kind of politician. So he brings 3 things to the race that are going to change the dynamics in ways that you're going to start. I'm sure you're starting to see it already in polling, and you know, will start to manifest itself.
And also now we have your classic head-to-head race. I mean, you got Cuomo on 3 ballot lines, you got Palladino on 3 ballot lines.
Right.
If you had 2 Republicans out there, it made what would be a difficult chore anyway that much more difficult. Okay. So there's no siphoning off. There's no, you know, other Republican there to be a safe harbor for people who don't like Palladino or Cuomo.
You know what's interesting? There was a congressional candidate, Richard Hanna. He's running against Mike Arcuri. He actually compared Carl Palladino to Chris Christie, the very enormously popular governor of New Jersey. Do you think that's an apt comparison?
Look, I don't ever think it's necessarily an apt comparison to compare any politician to another politician. I think that the atmospherics and the environment are there for a Carl Palladino who is very anti-establishment, who is very straight-spoken, which I think Governor Christie is as well, to take on an establishment politician, somebody who is very well known, Cuomo, vis-a-vis Corzine. So I think that it sets up the same way. No, I think Palladino and Christie come from very different backgrounds. But again, I think that Palladino's background works because people in New York are so fed up with Albany.
But I think it's
politicians.
But I think it's interesting, Liz, that you have Hanna, who's running against Arcuri, making those kind of statements, yet you have other people on the statewide Republican ticket a la their Dan Donovan, the Attorney General candidate, and Harry Wilson, the Controller candidate, not endorsing
Well, but
the
you've
top
seen
of
the
the ticket.
numbers in New York 24. I mean, there are more Republicans than there are Democrats, and the independents are going to swing. I mean,
Right.
it makes sense from a statewide perspective because now you're going to see Palladino. He has said, his campaign manager has said, spend 60%, 70% of his time in New York City, where he's a virtual unknown, and that's where Democrats are. He'll focus on Queens, and he'll focus on Staten Island, where there are more Republicans,
Parts
and
of
course
Brooklyn.
Long Island, parts of Brooklyn, sure, where like Marty Golden is, for example, a Republican
Michael
Brooklyn
Long.
senator, and Mike Long, the Conservative Party chairman.
Sure.
What about now? We've seen Andrew Cuomo. All of a sudden, there was a lot of. He looks like he was rocked back, even if you don't believe the Q poll, which had the 6-point spread, and yours was quite different. 33 was that what the spread was? I mean, he looks now. He is out of the Rose Garden with a vengeance.
Right.
He was on this show. He's out in upstate. He's campaigning in Palladino's hometown of Buffalo. Do you believe that he in fact got thrown for a loop?
I think he saw the strategy that Rick Lazio used and took the lesson that it's not going to work. I don't know that anything he's done yet actually is going to move the ball forward because he's in a little bit of a bind that the more that he does that reinforces his establishment sort of credentials actually works against him with the very voters who have a problem with the establishment. So, you know, his being more articulate on policy and programs, I don't think New Yorkers want programs. I think that they want tax cuts. I don't think that they want more, you know, talking about, you know, their experience in elected office, how they're going to translate that. I think they want actually somebody who can come in and clean out the folks in elected office.
I think Cuomo learned a lesson, and that is he thought he could do what Spitzer did against Faso 4 years ago and just walk through the election and win in a
But the
landslide.
media learned its lesson.
Absolutely,
That's the problem.
absolutely. So
So it's all the media's fault.
Cuomo
I didn't say that, Dave. You said that, Mr. Former Communications Director.
Well, I've said that before, but I always get
I think the media was just doing its job, Liz.
Thanks, Steve. That's much better. Thank you.
But I think Cuomo learned that he can't just walk through this campaign, that he's got to actually show voters that he wants to win, that he has a real plan. And I think you're right to an extent, Dave. I think Cuomo has a difficult job. Even though he's in the lead right now, he's got a difficult job because he's got to do two things simultaneously. One, he's got to appeal to those moderates and those folks who are sick and tired of Albany, but he's also got to appeal to and generate support among the left wing of
Well,
the
you saw
Democratic
him-
Party to
you saw him
build
try
up the
and
base.
Do that this week
Absolutely.
with the African American voters, who he has always had a little bit, or at least since 2002, as you well know, has a little bit of a rocky relationship with.
Although he's had the rocky relationship with the leadership of the African American community since 2005, 2006, when he ran for AG and won. His numbers are very good with African American voters. His favorable unfavorable rating in last week's Siena poll overall is 60-31, 60% favorable, 31% unfavorable. Among African Americans, 79-12.
Oh, wow, that's high, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he doesn't do quite as well as President Obama does with African-American voters, but he does really strong. And now, this week, what you saw was the African-American leadership led by Carl McCall, who he had challenged, Bill Thompson, Charlie Rangel, Hazel Dukes, the leadership of the of different parts of the African-American communities coming together behind Cuomo.
Yeah, and that's probably all true, and I don't doubt that. But the
man has the numbers.
No, I
David.
know, I know. Lucky he had numbers is good. I think, but the real issue is where the energy come from. Who's going to come out, and why are Democratic voters going to come out? Period, in this year, and why in particular are minorities and African American voters going to come out? I don't know that they are. I don't think that there's excitement there. I think that they identify, and again, I would agree that I think that his record and his effort with respect to the minority community is fine, and don't really enjoy the whole racial politics stuff anyways. But at the end of the day, I think the Democrats have a problem overall with getting the kind of voter turnout that they're going to need for him to have the kind of victory that he wants.
Turnout is going to be the key to this year's election, both for individual legislative races, congressional races, and the statewide races. I mean, who turns out and how big they turn out is going to be key for somebody like Eric Schneiderman.
Yeah. So you want to
absolutely.
take your money and put it into field. I mean, that's what I think we're going to see. Field operations, meaning you get out the vote operations, you're moving of people.
And the Democrats and the Republicans, both parties parties have to excite their voters.
Right.
We know historically more than half of registered voters stay home and sit on their hands in gubernatorial elections. For the last 4 or 5 gubernatorial elections, the turnout's been between like 45 and 48%. Right. So both sides got to, and the Republicans on this one have an easier job because their voters are more angry than the Democrats.
And our voters are angry on every level. They're angry at Congress. They're angry at the president. They're angry at Albany.
Democrats control Albany and Washington.
But, you know, nobody's really looking, and I don't like to be the skunk at the garden party. However, I think that it's too much of an intellectual argument, and it doesn't, and I think Rick Lazio tried to make it, that it was doesn't speak to the visceral anger that voters feel.
That's right.
But once you get to Albany, you got to govern. And as Mike Bloomberg said, anger is not a governing strategy. So what if a lot of people are saying, hey, it would be a kick to send Carl Palladino with his baseball bat to Albany, but then he says, I won't work with Shelley Silver. Why should I? The guy is a whatever, right? Yeah. So isn't that a little problematic?
I think it's rhetoric, and I think that, you know, it's campaign rhetoric that meant to excite and continue to get voters to identify. The flip side of that is that, and I watched that press conference, Mayor Bloomberg and the Attorney General saying, "I'm angry, darn it, I'm angry too." That doesn't play either. I mean, that is equally as ridiculous as saying, you know, we're all angry. That's silly as well. So Carl needs to continue to channel that energy and keep that energy so that our voters come out and he can win.
And can I just point out, Liz, if he gets elected and he brings his hammer, the last guy brought a steamroller.
A bat.
Well, he also had a hammer at one point, but the last guy brought a steamroller, and that didn't do him any good. Right. So, I mean, governors learn, even if they don't know it intuitively coming into the job, they learn pretty darn quickly that the legislature, whether controlled by the Democrats or controlled by the Republicans, is an independent part of state government, a co-equal branch, and governors learn that they have to find a way to get along with them.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you very much, because it kind of sounds like you think that Carl Palladino could govern, which I think is fascinating. We'll leave it right there with you, Steve Greenberg.
That's the last word.
Thank you very much, Dave. Unless you want to amend that real quick.
Well, I think he could be taught how to govern.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.